The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of the Grandview Hotel ballroom. Holofera Chen adjusted the strap of her emerald dress for the third time in as many minutes, her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched her small evening bag. The annual Metropolitan Arts Charity Gala was in full swing around her, a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos moving in practiced social choreography. Normally, she would have been enchanted by the elegance of it all. But tonight every champagne flute and every burst of laughter felt like a reminder of her mistake in coming here. She had known Trevor might attend. Her ex-boyfriend moved in these circles now, having clawed his way into a junior partnership at a prestigious law firm. But Holofera had convinced herself that the ballroom would be crowded enough to avoid him. That she could support the arts, foundation she cared about without confronting. The man who had spent 2 years systematically destroying her confidence. That hope shattered. The moment she spotted him near the auction tables, his arm draped possessively around a woman who looked barely out of college. Even from across the room, Holofera could see the self-satisfied smirk on his face as he scanned the crowd. When his eyes landed on her, that smirk widened into something predatory. Panic seized her chest. Trevor was already moving toward her, weaving through clusters of guests with the determination of someone who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Holofera's mind raced through her options. She could flee to the restroom, but that would only delay the inevitable. She could try to lose herself in the crowd, but Trevor had always been persistent when he wanted to assert control. Her eyes darted desperately around the ballroom and landed on a man standing alone near the terrace doors. He was tall, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and intensity. His black tuxedo fit him perfectly, suggesting either excellent tailoring or a body that naturally commanded attention. Unlike everyone else in the room, he seemed completely unbothered by the social performance happening around him. Instead, gazing out at the city lights, visible through the glass doors, with an expression of careful neutrality, without allowing herself time to second-guess, Holofera crossed the distance between them in quick strides. She could feel Trevor getting closer behind her, could almost hear his voice preparing some cutting remark about seeing her alone and pathetic at a charity event. "Excuse me," Holofera said breathlessly as she reached the stranger. Her voice came out higher than intended, edged with desperation. "I know this is completely insane, but can you be my boyfriend for a few minutes?" The man turned to look at her, and Holofera felt her breath catch. Up close, he was even more striking than she had realized. His eyes were a deep gray, intelligent and assessing, framed by dark lashes that would have been unfair on anyone less masculine. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous edge that contrasted with the refined elegance of his evening wear. For a long moment, he simply studied her. Holofera could feel heat rising in her cheeks, could feel the weight of how absurd her request must sound. She opened her mouth to apologize, to laugh it off and disappear into the crowd. "Boyfriend," he repeated, his voice low and smooth like aged whiskey. There was a hint of amusement in it, but also curiosity. "That's a very specific request from a complete stranger." "I know. I'm sorry. It's just that my ex is coming over here, and I really can't deal with him right now, and you looked like someone who could be convincingly dating someone like me and I. Promise I'll explain everything if you just help me out for?" Like 5 minutes in, Holofera was rambling now, the words tumbling over each other in her panic. The stranger's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Then, without warning, he reached out and gently took her hand, his fingers warm and steady against her cold ones. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her system. "Breathe," he said quietly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was surprisingly intimate. "I'll help you, but you owe me that explanation." Relief flooded through Holofera so powerfully that her knees felt weak. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you so much. He's right behind me now, isn't he? Tall, blonde, looks like he owns 3 boats but doesn't know how to sail any of them." The stranger asked, his eyes flicking over her shoulder. Despite her anxiety, Holofera felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. "That's terrifyingly accurate." "Holofera." Trevor's voice cut through the ambient noise of the gala like a knife. She turned, keeping her hand in the stranger's grip, and faced her ex-boyfriend. Trevor had stopped a few feet away, his date looking bored beside him. His eyes moved from Holofera to the man beside her, and something like uncertainty flickered across his face. I thought that was you. Still attending events above your pay grade? I see. The casual cruelty in his tone was so familiar that Holofera felt herself starting to shrink, to make herself smaller the way she always had during their relationship. But then the stranger stepped closer to her, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. I don't believe we've met, he said, his voice polite but carrying an undertone of steel. Julian Sterling. And you are? Holofera felt Trevor's entire demeanor change at the name. His eyes widened slightly, and he straightened his posture in a way that would have been comical if it wasn't so satisfying to witness. At Trevor Walsh, her ex said, offering his hand with considerably more deference than he had shown a moment before. Sterling Global Enterprises? Among other things, Julian confirmed, shaking Trevor's hand briefly before returning his attention to Holofera. The way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the room, made her heart skip. Darling, didn't you mention wanting to see the terrace? The view is supposed to be spectacular tonight. The endearment rolled off his tongue so naturally that for a moment, Holofera almost forgot this was an act. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and allowed Julian to guide her toward the terrace doors, with his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Wait, Trevor called after them? Confusion and something like anger coloring his voice. You two are together? Julian paused and turned back, keeping Holofera close to his side. For several months now, actually, though I can't imagine why that would be your concern. Holofera and I have a strict policy about not discussing past relationships. We prefer to focus on our future together. The dismissal in his tone was absolute. Trevor stood frozen, his date now looking at him with open curiosity, while other guests had started to notice the interaction. Without waiting for a response, Julian led Holofera out onto the terrace. The cool night air hit her face, and Holofera realized she had been holding her breath. The terrace was empty, the other guests preferring to stay inside, where the champagne and conversation flowed freely. City lights spread out below them like a field of stars, and the muted sounds of traffic mixed with the distant music from the ballroom. I'm sorry, Holofera said immediately, pulling her hand from Julian's and wrapping her arms around herself. That was so inappropriate of me. I shouldn't have dragged you into my mess. I just panicked and you were there and I didn't know what else to do. Julian leaned against the terrace railing, studying her with those perceptive gray eyes. How long were you together? 2 years, Holofera admitted. He spent most of that time convincing me that I was lucky he was willing to date someone as ordinary as me, that I should be grateful he'd put up with my boring job and my lack of social connections. I finally ended it 6 months ago, but seeing him still makes me feel like that small, worthless person he said I was. Assessment was wrong, Julian said simply. Anyone who has to make their partner feel small is compensating for their own inadequacies. And for what it's worth, there's nothing ordinary about you. Holofera looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. You don't even know me. I know that you had the courage to approach a complete stranger and ask for help instead of running away. I know that your ex's first instinct upon seeing you was to try to belittle you, which suggests he's still threatened by you months after you left him. And I know that when I said my name, you didn't react at all. Which means you genuinely had no idea who I was when you asked for my help. That alone makes you more interesting than 90% of the people in that ballroom. Heat rose in Holofera's cheeks again, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. Who are you exactly? Trevor clearly recognized your name, Julian Sterling. My family owns Sterling Global Enterprises. Investment banking, commercial real estate, venture capital, that sort of thing. We've been around for 3 generations, which means I spend most of my time at events like this one, shaking hands and pretending to care about people I'll never see again. He paused, then added with a hint of self-deprecation, I'm making myself sound insufferable, aren't I? A little, Holofera admitted, but she was smiling. Though I appreciate the honesty. I'm Holofera Chen. I'm a curator at the Westside Contemporary Art Gallery. I spend my days researching artists and organizing exhibitions and trying to convince people that abstract expressionism is more than just random paint splatters. I've been to that gallery, Julian said, his expression brightening with genuine interest. The exhibition last spring on post-war modernism was exceptional. The way the pieces were arranged created this narrative flow that made even the more challenging works accessible. Holofera stared at him. You actually paid attention to the curatorial choices. Why wouldn't I? The art itself is only part of the experience. The way it's presented, the context provided, the journey you create for the viewer, that's what transforms a collection of objects into something meaningful. He tilted his head slightly. Did you work on that exhibition? I was the lead curator, Halafera said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. It was my first major project after being promoted. I spent 8 months researching and planning every detail. Then I owe you thanks. It was the first time in years I actually enjoyed visiting a gallery instead of just going through the motions for social obligation. Julian pushed away from the railing and took a step closer to her. Would you like to get coffee? The real kind, not the pretentious espresso they're serving in there. I think I've earned that explanation you promised, and I'd like to hear more about your work. Halafera found herself nodding before she could overthink it. Coffee sounds perfect. But what about the gala? I've already donated more than enough to satisfy my social responsibilities for the evening. Besides, I'm finding the company out here far more compelling than anything happening in there. Julian offered her his arm with an old-fashioned courtesy that somehow didn't seem affected. Shall we? As they walked back through the ballroom toward the exit, Halafera caught sight of Trevor watching them, his expression a mixture of confusion and resentment. But for the first time since she had spotted him across the room, she didn't feel the familiar twist of anxiety in her stomach. With Julian beside her, steady and unshakable, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She felt free. The coffee shop Julian chose was nothing like Halafera expected. Instead of some trendy establishment with minimalist decor and overpriced lattes, he drove them to a small family-owned cafe tucked into a quiet neighborhood street. The neon sign in the window flickered slightly, advertising 24-hour service, and through the glass she could see worn vinyl booths and a long counter with red leather stools. "This is your idea of coffee?" Halafera asked, unable to hide her surprise as Julian held the door open for her. "Best coffee in the city?" he replied with conviction. "My mother used to bring me here when I was a kid, after piano lessons. The owner, Rosa, still remembers how I used to order hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and sit in that corner booth doing homework while my mother graded papers." "Your mother was a teacher?" Halafera slid into the booth he indicated, the vinyl squeaking slightly beneath her dress. "Professor of literature at Columbia, actually. She refused to let my father's money turn me into one of those kids who thought the world owed him something just for existing." Julian sat across from her, and somehow, even in this humble setting, he looked perfectly at ease. "She passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. But I still come here when I need to remember what matters." The raw honesty in his words caught Halafera off guard. Before she could respond, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a bright smile approached their table. "Oh, Julian Sterling." "As I live and breathe," she said warmly, her accent carrying hints of her Puerto Rican heritage. "It's been too long, mijo. And you brought a beautiful lady with you this time, Rosa. This is Halafera Chen, Halafera Rosa Delgado, proprietor of the finest establishment in Manhattan and keeper of all my childhood secrets." Julian's smile was genuine and unguarded in a way it hadn't been at the gala. "Don't you listen to him? Sweetheart. He was a perfect angel of a boy. Always polite, always studying hard." Rosa winked at Halafera. "Now, what can I get you to? And Julian, I'm bringing you apple pie, whether you ask for it or not. You're too skinny." After Rosa had taken their order and bustled back to the kitchen, Halafera leaned forward on her elbows. "You surprise me, Julian Sterling. How so?" "I expected someone from your world to suggest some exclusive lounge with a secret password and drinks that cost more than my monthly subway pass. But you brought me to a place that actually means something to you. That's either very calculated or very genuine, and I'm trying to figure out which." Julian considered this for a moment, then said quietly, "My world, as you put it, is full of calculated moves. Every conversation, every gesture, every smile is designed to achieve something. Position, advantage, access. I got very good at playing that game because I had to be. But tonight, when you ran up to me looking absolutely terrified and asked me to be your fake boyfriend, I wasn't Julian Sterling of Sterling Global Enterprises. I was just a guy standing on a terrace, and you needed help. That felt real in a way nothing has felt real in a very long time." Rosa returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and generous slices of apple pie. As she walked away, Halafera wrapped her hands around her mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Trevor started out real too, she said softly. At least I thought he did. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel special. But slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it happening, he started pointing out my flaws. The way I laughed was too loud. My clothes weren't sophisticated enough. My job wasn't prestigious. My friends weren't worth his time. By the end, I barely recognized myself. I had become this quiet, apologetic version of who I used to be, always afraid of disappointing him. What made you finally leave? Julian asked. Holofera took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. He forgot my birthday. Not just forgot to get me a gift or plan something special, he forgot entirely. When I reminded him the next day, he got angry at me for making him feel guilty. He said if my birthday mattered so much, I should have reminded him in advance. That he had important things to occupy his mind, and I was being childish for expecting him to keep track of arbitrary dates. And I realized that after 2 years together, the man I loved couldn't be bothered to remember the day I was born. That's when I understood that I had been fighting for a relationship that only existed in my imagination. He was a fool, Julian said with quiet intensity, and I don't mean that in some empty, comforting way. I mean that he had something genuine and valuable, and he was too shallow and insecure to recognize it. His loss has become my unexpected gain, because if you were still with him, you wouldn't have been standing on that terrace tonight. Their eyes met across the table, and Holofera felt that same electric current she had experienced when he first took her hand at the gala. This was dangerous territory, she knew. She barely knew this man, despite the intimacy of their conversation. And yet, there was something about the way he listened, really listened, that made her want to keep talking. They stayed in that booth for 3 hours, their coffee growing cold and being replaced with fresh cups. Julian told her about the pressure of being groomed to take over his father's empire, about board meetings where he was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, about the loneliness of never knowing if people wanted to be around him or around his bank account. Holofera shared her dreams of one day opening her own gallery, a space that could nurture emerging artists instead of just showcasing established names that were safe investments. It was past midnight when they finally left the cafe, with Rosa hugging them both and making Julian promise not to be such a stranger. On the sidewalk outside, the city had settled into its late-night rhythm, quieter but still alive with possibility. I should probably get you home, Julian said. Though he made no move toward his car, probably, Holofera agreed. Not moving either? Can I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe? Or is that too soon, and I'm coming across as desperate? The vulnerability in his question was endearing. Tomorrow works. Though I should warn you, my free time is limited. The gallery is preparing for a new exhibition, and I'm drowning in research and cataloging. What if I told you I have a vested interest in the success of the West Side Contemporary Art Gallery? Julian's expression was carefully neutral. Holofera felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. What do you mean? Sterling Global owns the building. We've been the gallery's primary investor for the past 5 years. I sit on the advisory board, though I'm rarely involved in day-to-day operations. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I didn't want it to color your perception of me or make you uncomfortable. The revelation should have felt like a betrayal. But Holofera found herself more curious than angry. So you're technically my boss's boss's boss? Technically, I'm a silent partner who signs checks and attends occasional meetings. Your boss, Director Hammond, runs the gallery with complete autonomy. I've never interfered with curatorial decisions or personnel matters, but yes, there is a professional connection between us that I should have disclosed sooner. I'm sorry. Holofera processed this information. Watching Julian's face for signs of the manipulation she had learned to recognize with Trevor, but all she saw was genuine concern that he had overstepped. Are you always this honest? She asked finally. The coffee shop Julian chose was nothing like Holofera expected. Instead of some trendy establishment with minimalist decor and overpriced lattes, he drove them to a small, family-owned cafe tucked into a quiet neighborhood street. The neon sign in the window flickered slightly, advertising 24-hour service. And through the glass she could see worn vinyl booths and a long counter with red leather stools. This is your idea of coffee? Holofera asked, unable to hide her surprise as Julian held the door open for her. Best coffee in the city, he replied with conviction. My mother used to bring me here when I was a kid, after piano lessons. The owner, Rosa, still remembers how I used to order hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and sit in that corner booth doing homework while my mother graded papers. Your mother was a teacher? Holofera slid into the booth he indicated, the vinyl squeaking slightly beneath her dress. Professor of literature at Columbia, actually. She refused to let my father's money turn me into one of those kids who thought the world owed him something just for existing. Julian sat across from her. And somehow, even in this humble setting, he looked perfectly at ease. She passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. But I still come here when I need to remember what matters. The raw honesty in his words caught Holofera off guard. Before she could respond, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a bright smile approached their table. Ouch. Julian Sterling. As I live and breathe, she said warmly, her accent carrying hints of her Puerto Rican heritage. It's been too long, mijo. And you brought a beautiful lady with you this time, Rosa. This is Holofera Chen. Holofera, Rosa Delgado. Proprietor of the finest establishment in Manhattan and keeper of all my childhood secrets. Julian's smile was genuine and unguarded in a way it hadn't been at the gala. Don't you listen to him? Sweetheart. He was a perfect angel of a boy. Always polite. Always studying hard. Rosa winked at Holofera. Now, what can I get you to? And Julian, I'm bringing you apple pie, whether you ask for it or not. You're too skinny. After Rosa had taken their order and bustled back to the kitchen, Holofera leaned forward on her elbows. You surprised me, Julian Sterling? How so? I expected someone from your world to suggest some exclusive lounge with a secret password, and drinks that cost more than my monthly subway pass. But you brought me to a place that actually means something to you. That's either very calculated or very genuine, and I'm trying to figure out which. Julian considered this for a moment, then said quietly, my world, as you put it, is full of calculated moves. Every conversation, every gesture, every smile is designed to achieve something. Position, advantage, access. I got very good at playing that game because I had to be. But tonight, when you ran up to me looking absolutely terrified and asked me to be your fake boyfriend, I wasn't Julian Sterling of Sterling Global Enterprises. I was just a guy standing on a terrace and you needed help. That felt real in a way nothing has felt real in a very long time. Rosa returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and generous slices of apple pie. As she walked away, Holofera wrapped her hands around her mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Trevor started out real too, she said softly. At least I thought he did. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel special. But slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it happening, he started pointing out my flaws. The way I laughed was too loud. My clothes weren't sophisticated enough. My job wasn't prestigious. My friends weren't worth his time. By the end, I barely recognized myself. I had become this quiet, apologetic version of who I used to be, always afraid of disappointing him. What made you finally leave? Julian asked. Holofera took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. He forgot my birthday. Not just forgot to get me a gift or plan something special. He forgot entirely. When I reminded him the next day, he got angry at me for making him feel guilty. He said, if my birthday mattered so much, I should have reminded him in advance. That he had important things to occupy his mind, and I was being childish for expecting him to keep track of arbitrary dates. And I realized that after 2 years together, the man I loved couldn't be bothered to remember the day I was born. That's when I understood that I had been fighting for a relationship that only existed in my imagination. He was a fool, Julian said with quiet intensity. And I don't mean that in some empty, comforting way. I mean that he had something genuine and valuable, and he was too shallow and insecure to recognize it. His loss has become my unexpected gain, because if you were still with him, you wouldn't have been standing on that terrace tonight. Their eyes met across the table, and Holofera felt that same electric current she had experienced when he first took her hand at the gala. This was dangerous territory, she knew. She barely knew this man, despite the intimacy of their conversation. And yet, there was something about the way he listened. Really listened, that made her want to keep talking. They stayed in that booth for 3 hours. Their coffee growing cold and being replaced with fresh cups, Julian told her about the pressure of being groomed to take over his father's empire, about board meetings where he was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, about the loneliness of never knowing if people wanted to be around him or around his bank account. Holofera shared her dreams of one day opening her own gallery, a space that could nurture emerging artists instead of just showcasing established names that were safe investments. It was past midnight when they finally left the cafe, with Rosa hugging them both and making Julian promise not to be such a stranger. On the sidewalk outside, the city had settled into its late-night rhythm, quieter but still alive with possibility. "I should probably get you home," Julian said, though he made no move toward his car. "Probably," Holofera agreed. "Not moving either. Can I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe? Or is that too soon and I'm coming across as desperate?" The vulnerability in his question was endearing. "Tomorrow works. Though I should warn you, my free time is limited. The gallery is preparing for a new exhibition, and I'm drowning in research and cataloging. What if I told you I have a vested interest in the success of the West Side Contemporary Art Gallery?" Julian's expression was carefully neutral. Holofera felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "Sterling Global owns the building. We've been the gallery's primary investor for the past 5 years. I sit on the advisory board, though I'm rarely involved in day-to-day operations. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I didn't want it to color your perception of me or make you uncomfortable." The revelation should have felt like a betrayal, but Holofera found herself more curious than angry. "So you're technically my boss's boss's boss?" "Technically, I'm a silent partner who signs checks and attends occasional meetings. Your boss, Director Hammond, runs the gallery with complete autonomy. I've never interfered with curatorial decisions or personnel matters. But yes, there is a professional connection between us that I should have disclosed sooner. I'm sorry," while Afira processed this information, watching Julian's face for signs of the manipulation she had learned to recognize with Trevor. But all she saw was genuine concern that he had overstepped. "Are you always this honest?" she asked finally. "I'm trying to be. Especially with you. I've spent too much of my life playing games and obscuring the truth for strategic advantage. It's exhausting, and it's made me into someone I don't particularly like. You asked me to be your boyfriend for a few minutes tonight, but what I'd really like is a chance to be something real. And that requires honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Then honestly, do you want to kiss me right now?" The question escaped before Holofera could second-guess it. Emboldened by the late hour and the coffee and the way Julian was looking at her, desperately, he admitted. "But I also want to do this right. I want to take you on proper dates and learn everything about you and earn the privilege of kissing when you're absolutely certain it's what you want. Not just because it's late and the moment feels romantic, but because you trust me." Holofera stepped closer to him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Julian Sterling, you are possibly the most frustrating man I've ever met. And also possibly the best. So yes, tomorrow. Pick me up at 7. But right now, just so we're clear, I'm absolutely certain." She rose up on her toes, and he met her halfway. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, a question being asked and answered. Then Julian's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing along her jaw, and Holofera felt herself melt into him. The kiss deepened, became something more urgent. And for a few perfect moments, the world narrowed to just the two of them, on an empty sidewalk in the city that never sleeps. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you, I'm going to want to do that again, frequently." "Certainly hope so," Holofera said with a smile. The next several weeks unfolded like a dream. Julian kept his promise, taking her on dates that ranged from elegant dinners to midnight walks through Central Park to an afternoon spent exploring a flea market in Brooklyn where Holofera found a vintage Art Deco lamp she had been searching for months. He showed up at the gallery during her lunch breaks with food from Rosé's cafe, sitting in her cramped office while she worked through cataloging details and listening with genuine interest as she explained her vision for upcoming exhibitions. But reality, as it always does, began to intrude on their bubble. The first crack appeared when Holofera attended a business dinner with Julian, a supposedly casual gathering of his colleagues and associates. She spent the evening fielding thinly veiled questions about her background, her education, her family's origins. One woman, a shareholder's wife, dripping in diamonds, asked with false sweetness if Halifra's parents had immigrated from China or if she was American-born. As if the answer would determine her worthiness to sit at that table. Julian, sensing her discomfort, cut the conversation short and took Halifera home early. But the damage was done. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been evaluated and found wanting. That she was a curiosity in Julian's world rather than an equal participant. The second crack appeared when a photo of them leaving a restaurant appeared in a society blog, accompanied by speculation about Julian Sterling's mysterious new girlfriend. Within hours, Halifera's phone was flooded with messages from acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly interested in her life. Trevor sent a text that simply read, "I see you landed on your feet," the bitterness evident even through the screen. But the real test came when Julian invited her to dinner at his father's estate in the Hamptons. Halifera spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress that felt appropriate without trying too hard. The drive out of the city was tense. With Julian growing quieter the closer they got to their destination, the Sterling estate was magnificent in a way that made Halifera's modest childhood home feel microscopic in comparison. Manicured lawns stretched toward a private beach, and the main house was all glass and steel angles. Modern architecture designed to impress. Julian's father, Richard Sterling, was exactly what Halifera expected: tall, distinguished. With silver hair and eyes that assessed everything like a balance sheet, his handshake was firm but perfunctory, his smile polite but never reaching his eyes. Julian's stepmother, Veronica, was elegantly dressed and gracious in a way that felt practiced rather than genuine. Dinner was an ordeal. Every topic of conversation felt like a test Halifera wasn't sure how to pass. Richard asked about her family's business interests with barely concealed surprise. When she explained her parents ran a small accounting firm in Queens, Veronica inquired about her education. Nodding with faint approval at the mention of her master's degree, but clearly underwhelmed that it came from a state university rather than an Ivy League institution. Through it all, Julian tried to redirect the conversation to showcase Halifera's accomplishments and passion for her work. But the underlying message was clear. She wasn't what they had envisioned for the Sterling heir. The breaking point came during dessert, when Richard leaned back in his chair and addressed Julian directly. As if Halifera weren't sitting right there. "She seems like a lovely girl. Son, very earnest. But you understand this is a phase. Yes. You'll need to make a more suitable match eventually. Someone who understands our world and can navigate it appropriately. Someone from a family with comparable standing." The silence that followed was deafening. Halifera felt her face flush hot with humiliation. But before she could formulate a response, Julian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Halifera isn't a phase, father. She's the woman I love. And if you can't treat her with the respect she deserves, then we won't be returning to this house." Richard's eyebrows rose in surprise. Clearly, he wasn't used to being contradicted by his son. "Julian, be reasonable. I'm simply looking out for your future. The family business requires certain alliances, certain connections. The family business can adapt or it can fail. But I won't sacrifice my happiness to maintain appearances that stopped mattering decades ago." Julian stood, offering his hand to Halifera. "We're leaving." In the car, Halifera sat in stunned silence, while Julian drove with white-knuckled intensity. Finally, she found her voice. "You said you love me." Julian glanced at her, his expression softening. "I did, and I do. I'm sorry you had to hear it for the first time in the middle of a fight with my father, but it's true. I love you, Halifera. I love the way you see beauty in things other people overlook. I love how passionate you are about your work. I love that you challenged me to be honest instead of strategic. And I love that you asked a complete stranger to be your fake boyfriend and accidentally gave me something real." Tears pricked at Halifera's eyes, but she was smiling. "I love you too. Even though you're impossible and your family terrifies me and I have no idea how we're going to make this work. We'll figure it out," Julian said with certainty. "Together. Because that's what people do when they love each other. They figure it out." He pulled the car over onto a quiet side road and kissed her with an intensity that left no room for doubt. And in that moment, Halifera decided that maybe, just maybe, love really could bridge even the widest of gaps. The morning light filtered through the windows of Halifera's apartment. Casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor, she stood in her small kitchen, making coffee and replaying the events of the previous night in her mind. Julian's declaration of love, his confrontation with his father, the way he had chosen her over his family's expectations. It felt surreal, like something from one of the romance novels she secretly read. During slow afternoons at the gallery, her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Julian? Breakfast? I promise no family drama, just pancakes and us. She smiled, typing back a quick affirmative. As she got ready, Halifera caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror and paused. She looked different somehow. Not physically, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there months ago when she was still diminishing herself for Trevor's comfort. She looked like someone who knew her own worth. The weeks that followed the disastrous Hampton dinner were a delicate balance of joy and challenge. Julian's father had called him twice, attempting to smooth things over while simultaneously suggesting that perhaps Halifera and Julian should take some time apart to gain perspective. Julian had refused both times, his resolve unwavering. At the gallery, Halifera threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She was curating an exhibition featuring emerging Asian American artists, a project close to her heart that explored themes of identity, displacement, and belonging. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was grappling with these same themes in her personal life. One afternoon, as she was reviewing potential pieces for the exhibition, Director Hammond appeared in her office doorway. Patricia Hammond was a formidable woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair always pulled into a perfect chignon and an eye for talent that had made the West Side Contemporary one of the most respected galleries in the city. Halifera, do you have a moment? Patricia's tone was unreadable. Of course, Halifera gestured to the chair across from her desk, her stomach tightening with sudden anxiety. Had someone complained about her relationship with Julian? Was there some conflict of interest she hadn't considered? Patricia settled into the chair and studied Halifera for a long moment. I've been meaning to speak with you about your relationship with Julian Sterling. Here it comes, Halifera thought, bracing herself for a lecture about professionalism or inappropriate workplace dynamics. I think it's wonderful, Patricia continued, surprising her completely. Julian is a good man, despite what his balance sheet might suggest. And more importantly, I've watched you blossom these past months. Your work has always been exceptional, but lately there's a confidence in your curatorial choices that wasn't there before. You're taking risks, trusting your instincts. That's exactly what this gallery needs. Halifera felt relief wash over her. Thank you, Patricia. That means more than you know. However, Patricia leaned forward slightly. I want you to understand something. Your position here, your success, that's all yours. You earned it through talent and hard work, not through who you're dating. Don't let anyone, including yourself, diminish what you've accomplished by attributing it to Julian's influence. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Halifera said, feeling a surge of gratitude for this woman who had mentored her for 3 years. As Patricia left her office, Halifera's phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, Halifera. It's Trevor. Her blood ran cold. What do you want, Trevor? I need to talk to you, in person. It's important. His voice had that manipulative edge she remembered too well, the one that used to make her question her own reactions. We have nothing to talk about. It's about Julian. There are things you should know about him, about his business dealings, things that affect you directly. Meet me at the cafe on Lexington and 68th. 1 hour. Please, Halifera. I'm trying to help you. He hung up before she could refuse. Halifera sat staring at her phone, her mind racing. This was Trevor's game, stirring up doubt and insecurity. She should ignore it, block his number, tell Julian about the call. But what if there was something she needed to know? What if her relationship with Julian had blinded her to some truth she should see? An hour later, she found herself sitting across from Trevor in an upscale cafe that was trying too hard to be Parisian. He looked the same as always, impeccably dressed and wearing that expression of concern that she now recognized as performance. Thank you for coming, he began, reaching across the table as if to take her hand. She pulled back, keeping her hands in her lap. Say what you need to say, Trevor. I have work to get back to. He's always so dedicated, he said with a hint of condescension. That's one of the things I always admired about you, even if I didn't show it properly. But Holofera, I'm worried about you. Julian Sterling isn't who you think he is. And who do you think he is? Trevor pulled out his phone, swiping through screens before turning it toward her. 3 months ago, Sterling Global acquired a controlling interest in the West Side Contemporary Art Gallery, not just as investors, but full ownership. They haven't announced it publicly yet, but it's a matter of record. Julian Sterling now owns the place where you work. Holofera's heart stuttered. What? The acquisition happened right around the time you two started dating? Don't you find that timing suspicious? He pursued you, made you fall in love with him, all while essentially becoming your boss. And you had no idea. Trevor leaned back, letting his words sink in. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because you deserve to know when you're being manipulated. Again, implication hung in the air like poison. Holofera felt her carefully constructed confidence beginning to crack. Had Julian known about the acquisition when they met? Had their entire relationship been built on deception? Why are you really telling me this, Trevor? What do you get out of it? Maybe I realized I made a mistake letting you go. Maybe seeing you with him made me understand what I lost. Or maybe I just don't want to see you get hurt by someone who sees you as a pawn in his business strategy. He reached across the table again, and this time she was too stunned to pull away. You deserve better than that, Holofera. You always did. She left the cafe in a daze, Trevor's words echoing in her mind. Instead of returning to the gallery, she found herself walking aimlessly through Central Park, trying to make sense of what she had learned. Her phone rang 3 times with calls from Julian, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Not until she knew what to say, what to feel. It was nearly evening when she finally went home, exhausted and emotionally raw. She was surprised to find Julian waiting outside her apartment building, still wearing his work suit, his expression anxious. You weren't answering your phone, he said as she approached. I was getting worried. When did Sterling Global acquire full ownership of the gallery? The question came out sharper than she intended. Julian's face fell, and she had her answer before he even spoke. 3 months ago, right after I took over as CEO from my father, it was part of a larger restructuring. Did you know when we met? At the gala, when I asked you to be my fake boyfriend, did you already own the place where I work? No. The acquisition was finalized 2 weeks after the gala. But Holofera, I was going to tell you, when. Her voice broke. When were you going to tell me that you bought my workplace? That you essentially control my career? Was any of this real, Julian? Or was I just another acquisition for Sterling Global? Don't. He stepped closer, his voice urgent. Don't let whatever Trevor told you twist what we have. Yes, I should have told you about the acquisition sooner. Yes, I made a mistake by keeping it from you. But nothing about my feelings for you has ever been strategic or calculated. I love you, Holofera. That has nothing to do with business or acquisitions or anything except the fact that you walked into my life and made me remember what it feels like to be genuine. How can I trust that? How can I trust any of this when you keep hiding things from me? First, the fact that you own the building, now that you own the entire gallery. What else haven't you told me, Julian? What other secrets are waiting to destroy what we've built? Nothing. I swear to you, there's nothing else. And I didn't tell you about the full acquisition because I was afraid of exactly this reaction. I was afraid you would think I was trying to control you or manipulate you when all I've ever wanted was to support you. The gallery was struggling financially. We either had to acquire it completely or pull our investment. I chose to acquire it because I believed in what Patricia was building there. Yes, because I knew how much you loved working there. I wanted to protect that. Holofera wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the mild evening. I need time to think. I need to figure out if I can do this, if I can be with someone whose world is so different from mine that I constantly feel like I'm navigating a minefield of secrets and social politics. How much time? Julian asked quietly. I don't know. A few days? Maybe a week? I just need space to clear my head without your father or Trevor or anyone else telling me what I should think or feel. Julian nodded slowly, the pain evident in his eyes. I'll give you whatever time you need. But please know that I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. He turned to leave, then stopped. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small envelope and handed it to her. This is a letter of resignation from my position on the gallery's advisory board, effective immediately. and a formal recommendation that you be promoted to senior curator with full autonomy over exhibition selection and a significant salary increase. I had Patricia draw it up this afternoon, before any of this happened. I wanted you to know that your career is yours, completely separate from our relationship. Whatever you decide about us, that doesn't change. Holofera took the envelope with trembling hands. Unable to speak as Julian walked away into the gathering dusk, the next 5 days were the longest of Holofera's life. She threw herself into work, finalizing details for the upcoming exhibition. Patricia, true to her word, presented her with the promotion papers and a salary package that was more generous than anything Holofera had dared to hope for. She signed them, feeling both elated and hollow, wishing Julian was there to celebrate with her. On the third day, she received a thick package at her apartment. Inside was a comprehensive business plan for an independent art gallery, complete with market analysis, financial projections, and potential locations. A note in Julian's handwriting read, "You mentioned once that you dreamed of opening your own gallery someday. I had my team put this together. It's yours, whether we're together or not. Your dreams don't depend on me. They never should." On the fifth day, Trevor called again. This time, she was ready for him. "I made a mistake meeting with you," she said before he could speak. "You spent 2 years making me doubt myself, and I'm not going to let you do it again." "Yes, Julian kept things from me. Yes, our relationship is complicated, but the difference between you and him is that he keeps secrets because he's afraid of losing me. You kept secrets because you enjoyed having power over me. I choose complicated love over toxic control. Don't contact me again." She blocked his number and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. On the 7th day, Holofera went back to Rose's cafe. The older woman took one look at her and immediately poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding into the booth across from her. "You look like a woman with a decision to make," Rosa said gently. "How did you know?" "Because Julian has been coming here every night this week. Sitting in that same booth you're in now, looking like his heart is breaking, and because I've been alive long enough to recognize the difference between love that's worth fighting for and love that will destroy you. So tell me, Mia, which one is Julian?" Holofera thought about the question, really thought about it. She thought about how Julian had defended her to his father, how he had supported her work without trying to control it, how he had given her space when she asked for it, even though it clearly pained him. She thought about the business plan he had commissioned for her dream, the way he listened when she talked about art, the vulnerability in his eyes when he told her he loved her. "He's worth fighting for," she said finally. "He makes mistakes. But so do I. And I think maybe I've been so afraid of being hurt again that I was looking for reasons to run instead of reasons to stay." Rosa smiled. "Then what are you doing sitting here with an old woman? Go find your man." Holofera found Julian exactly where she expected to, standing on the terrace at the Grandview Hotel, where they had first met. The gala was long over, but the hotel still hosted events most weekends, and tonight was no exception. She made her way through the crowd of elegantly dressed strangers, her heart pounding. He turned when she approached, his expression transforming from surprise to hope to careful restraint. "Holofera, you were wrong," she said, without preamble. "When you said I should have heard I love you for the first time in a better moment, that moment was perfect because it was real. You stood up for me when it would have been easier to stay silent. You chose me over your father's expectations. That meant more than any romantic declaration could have." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the acquisition sooner," Julian said. "I'm sorry for all the ways I've made this harder than it needed to be. My world comes with complications I can't always control, but I promise to always be honest with you about them. And I'm sorry I ran instead of talking to you first. I let Trevor get in my head because part of me still doesn't believe I deserve this, deserve you, but I'm working on that, and I want to keep working on it with you." She stepped closer. "I love you, Julian Sterling. I love your terrible habit of throwing money at problems. I love how you pretend to be all business, but you still visit Rose's cafe because it reminds you of your mother. I love that you saw something worth protecting in a scared woman asking a stranger for help. I love all of it, complications and all." Julian closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you too. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve every good thing this world has to offer." The kiss that followed was different from all the ones before it. It wasn't tentative or exploratory or even desperate. It was a promise, a beginning, a choice they were both making with eyes wide open. 6 months later, Halifera stood in the center of her new gallery. Adjusting the lighting on a sculpture by an up-and-coming artist from Brooklyn, the space was everything she had dreamed of. High ceilings, exposed brick walls, large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. She had named it The Haven, and it had quickly become known for showcasing diverse voices that larger galleries often overlooked. The opening night was a success by any measure. Critics praised the debut exhibition, collectors made purchases, and artists thanked her tearfully for believing in their work. Julian stood off to the side, watching her with undisguised pride as she moved through the crowd with confidence and grace. Later, after the last guest had left and they were alone among the artwork, Julian pulled her close. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice carrying a nervousness she rarely heard from him. "Julian Sterling, if you're about to acquire another building without telling me," then dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Actually, I was hoping to acquire a wife, if she'll have me." Halifera's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Halifera Chen, you walked into my life and asked me to be your boyfriend for a few minutes. You had no idea who I was, no agenda, no calculation. You just needed help, and you trusted me to provide it. Since that moment, you've challenged me to be better, to be more honest, to remember that wealth and power mean nothing compared to genuine connection. You've built something beautiful here, all on your own merit, and I would be honored to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams, celebrating your victories, and maybe occasionally being your fake boyfriend when you need to impress someone at a party." "Yes," she managed to choke out through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring slid onto her finger, a simple platinum band with a single sapphire that matched the dress she had worn the night they met. Julian stood and kissed her, and in that moment, Halifera understood that sometimes the best love stories begin with a desperate improvisation and transform into something more real than any carefully laid plan. Their wedding 6 months later was a blend of both their worlds. They held the ceremony at Rosa's Cafe, which they had rented for the entire day. Julian's father attended, his relationship with his son still strained, but slowly healing. Patricia gave Halifera away, having become something of a mother figure to her, and Rosa herself provided the catering, insisting that no Sterling money was going to turn her cafe into something it wasn't. The reception was held at the Sterling estate, but Halifera had transformed the usually austere space, with help from several artists she represented. Colorful installations hung from the ceilings, sculptures dotted the lawn, and a local jazz band played music that made even the most uptight guests tap their feet as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. Halifera whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" Julian asked. "For being my fake boyfriend when I needed you, and for becoming my real everything when I didn't even know I was looking for it. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger standing on a terrace. Best decision either of us ever made." Years passed, measured in gallery openings and business expansions and quiet mornings in Rosa's Cafe. Halifera published a book on contemporary Asian American art that became required reading in university programs across the country. Julian restructured Sterling Global to focus on sustainable investments and ethical business practices. Earning both praise and criticism from the business world, they bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, halfway between Halifera's gallery and Julian's office, filling it with art and books and laughter. Rosa became a regular dinner guest, bringing stories and wisdom and endless supplies of her famous apple pie, Trevor. They heard through mutual acquaintances, had moved to Los Angeles, and married someone with the right pedigree and empty conversation. They wished him well from a distance and never thought of him again. On their 5th anniversary, Julian surprised Halifera with a weekend trip back to the Grandview Hotel. They stood on that same terrace where it all began. The city lights spread out before them like possibilities. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd said no that night?" Julian asked, his arm around her waist. Halifera leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Every day. And every day I'm grateful you didn't, though I have to admit, you're a terrible fake boyfriend. You kept forgetting it was supposed to be pretend." "My mistake," he said with a smile. "I tend to go all in, once I commit to something. Lucky for me. Lucky for both of us. As they kissed under the stars, two strangers walking past on the terrace below paused to watch them. Smiling at the obvious love between the couple, one whispered to the other, "I wonder what their story is." If they'd known, they would have learned that the best love stories don't start with certainty or perfection. They start with a desperate request, a moment of trust. And two people brave enough to take a chance on something real, Holofera and Julian, had found their forever in the space between a fake beginning and an authentic ending. And every day they chose to keep writing new chapters together, one honest moment at a time. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.